My name's Steve Southey, and this is George Gerchow. We're going to talk to you today about what we see happening with ITSM as we move into a cloud era. Before we get into it, there's some standard disclaimers for you guys to read. I'm not going to read them to you, but I'll leave them up there for a little bit so that you guys can read them.
I also want to apologize because it's not that I'm not paying attention to you guys, but I just don't trust other people's systems, so I'm kind of making some changes on mine on the fly.
You're making changes on the fly, George?
I'm making changes on the fly.
So how many of you think that's a good idea, that George is making changes on the fly when we're standing here in front of 300 people?
Yes, my IT peeps.
Dude, what are you doing? I've told you, this is why we have change process, George. You've got to follow the process.
Are you kidding me?
You guys going to sit there for a couple of minutes while we fix this? No more changes.
It's a rebuild.
Not really. So what we're going to cover today is some ITSM and traditional compute. Then we're going to talk about, very, very quickly, because I'm sure you've heard it all this week, what is cloud computing. We're going to talk about ITSM and cloud considerations, so what we have to add to the ITSM process when we're thinking about cloud. We're going to look at some benefits that you get as we move towards cloud, things that were traditionally hard to do that become a lot easier when we move into that cloud arena. We're going to show you some stuff, some automation, some process automation that'll help with this new cloud platform. And then we're going to let you guys ask questions. How many of you have seen this slide already this week? Should be everyone. If you haven't seen it, then you haven't been to a session. Pretty much covers the journey to the cloud. And what we're meant to do is talk about where our presentation fits into this journey. Well, we're talking about ITSM. It's been around longer than we've been talking about cloud. So really, it's the entire slide at this point we're talking about. It's just we're talking about how this has to change as we get more towards this side. So if you get nothing else out of today, you should get these 3 points. Cloud changes the way we deliver services. Pretty obvious, right? But that means that we have to change the way we think about implementing, designing, the strategy behind those services, because we're changing the way we're going to build and operate them. We need new processes, new people skills, and different technologies to make cloud efficient and effective.
Let's talk about that point just for 1 second. So this has been coming up a lot in other topics like compliance, like PCI, and what's mixed mode, and what's in scope or what's not. The reality is with virtualization, a lot of times, and especially stop and think about process folks, and this is no offense to them. I'm an ITIL master, Steven's ITIL certified as well too. They don't understand what's really happening in the space today, so they think they can pick up these processes that worked in a physical world, in those old application stacks in a data center where I could walk up to a rack and I could kind of see where that business service maybe lived or not, and transform that into a virtual world and transform it into cloud. That is not the case. Things have to change. Virtualization allows me to provision a system within seconds. But in your own organizations, how long does it take to provision a system out there and actually deploy a business service end to end? And what really gets in the way?
So how many can do it in an hour? One? Keep your hand up. We'll see if we can get the whole room to have their hand up. What about 1 day? Getting better. 1 week? All right, I'm scared to ask now.
1 month. And you know what? That's reality. A month. And what are the 2 things that get in the way? Anybody? Approvals, that's process. Delivery of the resources. Process. And the other one is people. I've always done it this way. I will continue to do it. That's not going to go along with the agility of virtualization. ITSM folks now have It's a time for them to step up to the plate and start making changes to really automate those processes and see which ones are working within their environment to truly do service delivery. So we're going to dive in a lot deeper into that, but how to leverage a lot of process automation within tools as well.
And the last point up there, of course, is some things get easier. Some of that stuff that we haven't really had to do or done well since we were on mainframes gets easier again. Things like capacity management. I know when I started in the IT industry, I was a mainframe operator, and we did a lot of capacity planning because it's a great big box. We have to know when we're going to run out. Fortunately, for most mainframe shops, that means IBM come out and turn a screw and you get 5 more processors and a whole extra set of memory. But we didn't really do the capacity management justice when we moved to the distributed server environment. So we're going to dive into people right now. And when we think about ITSM and traditional IT stacks, they were really designed around that static environment. We knew exactly where this business service was running. We knew which rack it was in the data center. We knew which port in the switch it was plugged into. We knew which servers it was speaking to. Well, at least we had Visio diagrams that alluded to which servers it was speaking to. And our processes relied on that. How many of you have CAB meetings, change advisory boards, where you review all the changes that are going to go into your environment?
Oh, the most boring meetings in the world. So let's go through what that CAB meeting looks like. Okay, so, my name is Steve Henning. I want to go out there. I want to make a change within the environment. I go to my manager, Rick. He says, oh, that change looks good. And let's say it's patch management on an OS server out there. Let's say I'm supposed to patch these machines at 2 o'clock in the morning. Go in front of the cab. I bring an old Visio diagram, as Stephen mentioned before, and say, this is what we think the cause and effect is going to be. This is the impact of this patch. That diagram is like 6 months old. Then I turn around and ask a data center ninja out there, whoever the smartest guy in the room is, what are the real dependencies? And after he rattles off about 20,000 IP addresses that make no sense to me, we decide to go ahead and make that change. Well, remember, I'm Steve Henning, right? Thursday night's ladies' night at the club. There ain't no way I'm going to be patching machines at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm still going to be out at the bar. So then I come back at 5 o'clock in the morning because I had a really good night and I deploy those patches. How does anybody know that I deployed those patches at 5 o'clock in the morning instead of 2? How does anybody know that I deployed extra patches or made extra changes on those machines outside of that change band? Anybody? You don't. Your change management process does not account for out-of-band change. It'd be even worse if my name was someone like Trey Lanier, but it always depends on who that individual is and what their attitude is and what process they follow. And a lot of times it's the data center mugging. I know, for example, that every time I'd get up to get my ding-dongs or my Jolt Cola or Mountain Dew at work, because I like to go 900 miles an hour, people stop me in the hallway. Hey, George, can you? Hey, George, can you do this? Hey, George, can you do that? You think I open up a ticket for all that? Absolutely not. I make those changes, right? Because I think, it's not going to have a lot of impact. So this has got to really change. So it didn't work in the physical world. So now what makes you think it's going to work in the virtual world when there's a lot higher rate of change taking place and a lot more moving components?
And that brings me to the next point. Change is the major cause of outage. Gartner says that 80% of service outages are caused by change. That's a really big number. That's why we have CABs. That's why we have change process. Because we realized that change is breaking things. And so we tried to implement processes to protect ourselves from that. Tried. But 80%, think about that. If I could get rid of that 80% of outage, I'd be much happier. I'd probably be at the bar with Steve Henning.
So, you think about everybody familiar with what happened with EC2 and their outage? How did that happen? It was a change. It was a change on network devices that caused a VM storm to take place, and that's what caused that outage. Every time you can relate it back to change. Stephen and I fly United exclusively. One day I'm sitting up in Palo Alto, get on a plane at 4 o'clock after doing a VBC, feeling good about myself. I'm already on the plane. I got lucky enough to get upgraded, which never happens to short ball guys like me. Get up there, get my first Bloody Mary in hand. All of a sudden they board the entire plane. I'm like, what's going on here? No plan of action to get everybody back on. Well, what happened was I look up on Twitter, the best source of information today as to what's going on. A United employee published up there that they did a software upgrade in the middle of the day to become compliant with Continental. It brought down every 757 in United's flights across the planet.
Brought down's a bad word when you talk about airplanes. Let's not go there.
It is a bad word, but it's always changed.
So I've already covered expects a static infrastructure, but there's a really high level of human interaction in our processes currently. We've all said that we have cabs. We've all said that people are the ones that are going to take it and rack it and plug it in and load OSs and do all that stuff. There's lots and lots of man hours invested in these ITSM processes. And that means that we, the IT guys, become the bottleneck to delivering new business services.
Speaking of bottleneck, I think you ought to move through the slides a little faster because your American's a little slow. So.
Oh, y'all?
Let's get going.
All right, so we'll cover this really quickly because I'm pretty sure you all know what cloud is by now. But it's on-demand self-service. And this is not my words, this is NIST, their definition of what cloud is. Broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured services. Does that sound like what you've been hearing cloud described as this week?
That's some beautiful music in the background. You and I may have to dance here in about 2 seconds. Not that kind of dance, slow dance.
So, some of the challenges we see when we start to think about ITSM and cloud. We've broken this up into the 3 layers that VMware sees as the big buckets when we move to cloud. And we start with the infrastructure. Traditionally, IT guys racked the servers, we've already established that. And so we knew exactly what was in our environment, or at least we thought we did. But now we're pushing that control out to our line of business users. So when Patch Tuesday comes along, how am I even going to know how many servers I've got, how many patches I need to push to those servers when I don't know that they even exist? Problem. That brings us to CMDB. CMDB is going to come up here a lot. This is actually George's line. He likes to talk about CMDB. He did it to me yesterday every time. You'll notice there's one in each. How do we keep that CMDB up to date on top of a fluid infrastructure? As the infrastructure changes through our end users, how do we keep that database that informs us of all the relationships and CIs that are in our environment, how do we keep that up to date?
That's an interesting question, though. How many people here believe in the concept of a CMDB, or their organization believes in the concept of a CMDB? Okay.
A few.
Does anybody see the CMDB going away?
Nobody?
Nope.
Not one.
Figures. We're going to get to that point here in a second. That's a good argument.
So let's move up the stack a little bit to applications. Depending on how you've deployed your application stack, think about PaaS or SaaS, there may be multiple releases a day to that application stack. Because it's distributed, I can update nodes without affecting the actual overall service performance. But how do I then do release management? What if I'm hosting this off somewhere else? Who's responsible for implementing those changes? There's a spreadsheet? That's your CMDB? Nice.
Hey, in a lot of cases it is. It's a very manual process, and CMDB is about asset. And to the point that Steve, being the only person in the room, didn't raise his hand, he doesn't care about where those assets rely. He believed that there's dial tone given to you as the infrastructure, and what really matters is that the application layer, what makes up performance for that application. That's what you ought to be looking at. Am I correct? There you go.
And speaking of Steve, Steve is all about performance. Normally at the bar at 2 o'clock in the morning, but then at work as well. How do we understand our performance in a fluid environment? How do we know which pieces of the puzzle are affecting our performance when we don't even know that they're there? How do we track those? How do we add to the system to understand performance in that fluid environment? We'll get to that. And then, of course, users. It used to be that it was fairly easy. I knew that Steve Henning sat at workstation 123 and Rick sat at 000. When they logged the ticket, I knew exactly which system they were using to access my environment, but that's changed. Now, Rick's probably in an airport somewhere sitting on his iPad, which is a 1, accessing the environment. How do I know that? How do I track that? How do I keep my CMDB again up to date with all the ways that Rick can access my applications now?
And speaking of instant access, let's instant access the next slide, please.
Oh, hold on, before we go there. Instant access is a good point. People want stuff now. Right? Who owns an iPad or an iPhone? How long do you wait after you purchase an app in the App Store? Well, in Vegas, like 15, 20.
Yeah. It's true. But think about this. Demands of the business are going to be the same way. If my business is shifting and I want a new application, I want it now. I don't want to wait. And I want the performance of that application to be top-notch, right? So it's the same thing. As an IT person, I have to start thinking this way. We have many examples after working with a lot of large financials in New York City over the last couple of weeks to where now they are swiping the credit card. And they're saying, I'm going to start offloading my business services out to a cloud environment because I don't believe that IT can deliver quickly enough for us to continue to grow and get a competitive
Keep
edge.
up, George. We're on the next slide.
Yes. About time.
So, ITSM and cloud considerations. Service strategy and design. We now have a whole new set of tools that we can throw into that service strategy and design. Are we changing our service design and service strategies to take into account those new tools? We have private cloud, we have public cloud, we have hybrid, we have SaaS, PaaS, IaaS. How do we implement our processes so that we take into account these new pieces of the puzzle? And then how, in this hybrid or public environment, do we ensure security and compliance for those business critical applications? Service transition. We've already talked about release management. How are we going to track and manage that high rate of release? Change management. Who owns that process? Not the guy with the spreadsheet. It'll be someone, either internal or external, that has to make those changes. But are we taking into account the difference now where there's not just my group of people that are responsible for that?
I think there's going to be someone that audits the changes, but it's going to be a more automated process underlying. You know, ITIL v3 didn't account for really virtualization or anything outside of physical components, but eventually what you're going to see is, what we're hoping is going to be more of a VITIL coming out, which is going to account for those virtual components, and it's going to truly be automated process, but someone still has to have stewardship and auditability and visibility of what's happening behind the scenes, because the manual intervention's got to stop.
And then, there it is again, configuration management. Is there a simple way to maintain my view of my CIs in that highly dynamic environment? And this is the biggest area, really, that's going to change. The service operation. How do I keep that environment up and running? How do I avoid my outages in that highly dynamic environment? How do I handle service desk? I spoke about the fact that Rick's at the airport on his iPad 1. How do I know that? How do I handle incidents when Rick calls in? What if he's calling in about something that's on the public part of my stack? Who should he call? Should he call me in IT? Should he call my public cloud provider? Should he call Apple because he's still on an iPad 1? Who knows? That's what we need to figure out. And then how do I push the information about all those incident and problem resolutions out to those line of business users? They're now the ones driving my infrastructure. How do I ensure that they have access to the data that I've hoarded in IT for all those years about how to fix things when they go wrong? And then performance management again. Truly, I need something that's going to learn how my environment should be. When we speak about performance management, how many of you have a Generation 1 type performance management tool that you've set hard thresholds in? CPU goes above 90% for more than 5 minutes, then that's bad. Cool. How many of you have something second generation that uses standard deviations and actually is a little more smart? And if I see all CPUs run at 80%, then anything that's 5% out of that, that's bad. A few. What if your performance management system could learn exactly how your IT stack runs every day, whether that's end of quarter, whether that's Friday afternoon, we run big backups, whatever it is, and learns normal, and then only alerts you when things are not running normally.
And that's the way it needs to happen, because what happens now with those generation ones, this is the scenario. Call service desk. Actually, let's use anybody work for the cable company? I'm getting ready to pick on you right now. This is what happens when I call the cable company. I can't get internet service. The guy on the other side of the phone goes, unplug the router, wait 30 seconds, shut off every machine, bring it back up. It all comes back up, nothing works again. He turns around and says, the network guy just made a change. That's what's happening on the other side, because the network guy is always the first guy blamed, right? Network guy turns around and says, I didn't make a change, so then all of a sudden they go to the DNS guy. He's the one that made the change. So it's all this finger pointing across the silos. In the meantime, I'm sitting over there, unplugging my router, rebooting it, unplugging all my machines and bringing them back up, because I don't know any better. I'm just doing what the guy on the phone tells me. So it's this constant finger pointing. Does that sound familiar? That never happens in IT shops, right?
No.
Network guy never gets blamed, right? Exchange guy, when email goes down, Exchange server's up. He's done with it. It's no longer his problem anymore. So looking across those silos and being able to correlate that information, that's where you want to be. Learning that health and that behavior of that application, then finding anomalies around that, that's where the future is headed with ITSM and performance.
And then the last point I wanted to cover here was access management. I've brought it up already. But how do I understand who has access to my assets in cloud? Apparently, if you're Amazon and you want to win the government business, you build a whole new cloud and only let those people have access, because it's a difficult problem to solve. There are some things that get much easier. There's good news here. Capacity management. As I mentioned earlier, we haven't done a great job of doing that in our x86 server world. But now it's far easier. It's all running in an environment where I can track not only performance, but the capacity that I'm using and the rate at which I'm using it, and plan for future capacity growth.
Yeah, it's on demand. As their business demands go up, that's the idea of cloud, being able to move those out there. The idea, though, is to be able to move them with confidence. The other thing it gives me is constant availability. So I know it's going to be available, I know it's going to be ready, and something that I'm going to be able to access over time. And really it comes down to decreasing costs. And that's where financial management comes in. I can now prove back to the business that it's going to be less expensive to resource this back out. Or when I build my own private cloud, it's going to be less expensive to be able to reach those resources back internally. Next slide.
Too late. So we're going to quickly talk about some technology solutions here. The reason George is pushing this along is he wants to show you, and he wants to have time to show you. So he's like, go, go, go. So traditionally, static siloed stacks managed by application, and they were very, very brittle. You make a change in there, things break. In the cloud, it's broken up differently into that infrastructure, application, and user bin. Much more dynamic and elastic. And then the issues from traditional IT that get fixed when we talk about cloud computing. We go from individually managing those things in an ad hoc manual way to dynamically and automatically being able to do that. You want to talk to this?
Sure, absolutely. So here's where we start really an integrated approach, just at a high level. Everything's baby steps. So one of the things that really bothers me a lot about vendor presentations, especially when I sat on the other side of the table, is we're going to auto-magically fix everything, right? Buy the $20 million that's on the truck and everything's going to work. Well, we're taking a holistic phased approach to get people, not only, we're talking a lot about cloud, but it's really still P2V, right? A lot of us still haven't made that transformation of going from physical to virtual, but then I got to think about virtual to private cloud, then eventually hybrid cloud, then probably public cloud. So the first step is around performance. That's what I'm going to attack first. I want to make sure that my applications are performing the way they're expected to back to my end user environment around three main things. First piece, performance. Second piece, capacity. So capacity management and right-size provisioning when I'm virtualizing that environment or building a private cloud. And then the third one is configuration management. The configuration management piece is important because now I need to understand what underlying changes are taking place that affect my performance. And bringing those all under one common umbrella that's make it transportable and easier for customers to consume. Next slide.
So I wanted to talk quickly about your lives, the things you do every day. This is the timeline of an outage. George makes a change up on stage, and that can lead to either performance anomalies, or in this case, as you saw, an outage.
And here's where the finger pointing starts, right? As soon as that outage occurs, the best real-time monitoring tool in the world is the one that informs us, right? And what's usually that? That's right, the end user. And we have to get out of that habit.
Exactly. So users first, and then shortly after that, monitoring tools. The next thing that happens is that we figure out what went wrong in the environment. And generally, this is about 75% of our outage window. It takes us to troll logs, have war room meetings, point fingers, get on video conference calls and point some more fingers. We spend a lot of time trying to determine what changed in our environment that caused the issue. And then we restore service. Sound about right? What do we use to do this? George likes Twitter. I don't find that useful for solving problems. But there are things like Google. We all like Google. And then we go and use the manual tools to remediate the issue and change back what we found to be wrong. So how can we help here? By tracking at a forensic level 80 to 100,000 pieces of information about every system in your environment, we can very quickly tell you what changed. So, what caused the problem?
Speaking of change, let's do this. So let's roll into the demo real quick, and then he's going to finish out that slide to kind of reinforce what we did. Okay, so what we're doing here is a combination of different product sets to really improve and automate just the change side itself. We already agreed that there's no solution really right now within our change management process that tells us when an out-of-band change occurs. Anybody wants to challenge that, we can talk about it. But I haven't seen a service desk yet to date that tells me we had an out-of-band change here. Okay? So let's look at, this was the first product. So this is VCM, vCenter Configuration Manager. And in the change management piece, it shows me two pieces. One, non-VCM initiated. Those are all changes. Who cares how they were made? Locally on the box, it was a script, it was another tool, who cares? The other one's VCM initiated, that's what we do, but that's not as interesting, right? I want to really go out there and be able to see what changes other people are making. So let's go through the scenario again. I'm calling up the service desk guy, right? And let's go down in here to groups. I can't access a certain server out there, I can't access an application, and all of a sudden, let's see who this guy is, because here's a change that I just saw where someone was added to an administrators group. Anybody see his name from back there? Somebody see it? Can you see it? Bill Gates. So Bill Gates calls up service desk. Do you think they're going to give him access to that box? What kind of access are they going to give him to that box? Administrative, whatever he wants. Exactly. That was the best answer. Whatever he wants. Now, I've been around Bill Gates for years. I don't want to give him access to anything, right? Because then that means that he has a lot of power within the organization. So we're going to show you how this ties back and reconciles back to services. But I'm now going to mark this. I'm going to check against my service desk. And again, this could be BMC, this could be HP, it could be our own service desk, which I'm going to demo the integration between those two, which is Service Manager. I'm going to mark this as an out-of-band change. Okay? So I'm going to put a little note in here, which is out-of-band. Okay. Nobody wants Billy. Then I'm going to go ahead, mark that, and now it's an out-of-band change sitting there within the environment. But let's see what kind of power Billy has, and we're going to go through this really, really quickly. So Bill's out there within the environment. I'm going to go to software inventory because I'm getting detailed configurations of machines. And by the way, I can right-click, uninstall software, view the history, do whatever I want. But I want to see every single piece of software installed out there. Oh, here's one. Anybody familiar with eMule? What's eMule? That's right. Torrent-style peer-to-peer sharing software. It is the new Napster. Right? It's what all the underground kiddies are using within colleges to pull down software. By the way, it's a great tool for any of you that want to take that as a recommendation. Okay? So now that we know that he's out there, because this is that same box he's got administrative rights to, what kind of files do you think I'm going to see sitting here in the file system? Yep, MP4s or MP3s. Let's see what kind of music Bill Gates listens to. So here's what he's got out there. A little Air Supply, Making Love Out of Nothing at All, Neil Diamond, right? Don't Bring Me Flowers Anymore. So Britney Spears, he's got all this music he's listening to. But you can see the power of what it is that he's doing out here within the environment. Shares, so into security, shares, he's got local admin rights, all this stuff. What I want to start doing is getting dependencies on what Bill's doing, and then I'm going to take action against his account. In fact, why don't we take the action against his account right now? So here's all my admin accounts. Okay, I'm going to show you the power of the integration back into Service Desk. Here's Bill. Right click. And by the way, he said his password would never expire. Of course, they did that. IT guys never do that, though, right? It's all set up. It's account. Well, let me ask this question. And here, hand out a couple shirts to the folks that answered those questions. What happens if I disable Billy's account, but he built mission-critical services on a server using that account, like SQL? The service goes down. That never happens either, though, right? We never see that, where someone has gone out there and done this use case scenario. What does Service Desk tell me about this at this point? 0. Can't match all those dependencies. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that. Let's go ahead and look at his service accounts. So this is all the service accounts running within the environment. Here's Bill Gates. Oh, he's running a firewall service. That's real nice. So let's go ahead and edit that, change it to local system. So lots of power here. But now watch what happens when I start tying this back into Service Desk. And I'll give you one of the best use cases on the planet for this. Okay, so this is what I like to call the reboot. And every environment in the world has one of these guys. The guy who accidentally rebooted something in the middle of the day. So I happened to be working with a federal government, and I was building a server on the side, and a buddy of mine was like, hey, I'm going to use your tool to bounce my friend's box in the middle of the day. Right? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Sounds good. Member server, no big deal. But instead of hitting this arrow, he hit this arrow. Okay? And then he scrolled over here, and he went, uh-oh. Okay, so something like that. Hey, this is Bill. You suck. Or your fantasy football team was garbage, whatever he decided to write, because the guy was a really smart dude, but he had a great sense of humor. Next. The red sea of alarms started hitting the environment. Everybody comes running into the data center, and there's the short, bald guy again with a vendor shirt on, all over me. Except for the guy that got the note on the server that was actually working on it. So he was like, hey, he's the one that bounced the box. And he bounced all of them within the environment. So at that time, I was like, okay, so you can't fix stupid. So let's go ahead and start integrating back into Service Desk. So be patient with me now, because now we're going to bring up another product and start bringing them both together. How many people here knew that VMware owned a Service Desk? So not many. Okay, so this is a Service Desk that was originally built in Australia. And it was all built around ITIL v3, but we transformed it to be virtualization and cloud aware. Okay, so this is called VSM. First thing that you're going to see is it brings me up a report as to what my business services are and what the service health is across the environment. But then it's got this ticketing piece here, okay? And I can come into this ticketing piece, and I can see where the changes came from. So in this case, it came from VCM, right? Now let me go back into this guy, restore down, and I'm going to enable the integration between the two guys. Where is my enable? There we go. Okay? So now what we should see is a huge difference when I come back into the other one and I go out there to make a change. Okay, so there it is. So now let's go back into VCM, so Configuration Manager. Okay, and I'm going to come back in through our reboot scenario. Notice anything different when I click on reboot? It comes back and says, okay, it's starting to generate a change ticket. And it asks me a couple questions. The first one is, what kind of change do you want to make? So I'm putting notes in to populate different fields within VSM as to what the change is. On one machine, on many machines. And then, do you want it to be an emergency change? Well, we're going to track the amount of emergency changes. We're also going to track and measure the change management process because we're trying to kill bottlenecks at this point. I'm going to go through that here in a second with a report. So I'm going to go next. I'm going to pick this VM. Okay. Okay, so nice little note there. Steve, CMDB lives. Next. And finish. Normally, right now, I guarantee you, if I didn't have this turned on, you would see this box bouncing like our friends did in the federal government. But now what's happened is, and I'm going to show it from this side first, is it's stuck in a job right here where it's pending. It's not going to take any action. It's waiting for a request to come back, assign it an RFC, and go through the approval process. Now, there is customization here because everyone's change management process is different, right? So we have to talk to you and figure out what you want to populate and what escalation process it goes through. But now it's starting to generate that ticket out there. Now, the other thing that we give you, too, on top of that is starting to correlate the information between the two. So let me go up into dashboards here, go into change reconciliation and service desk. I'm going to click on RFC summary. And now what it does is it builds me a report that says how many jobs I have that are pending out there, how many have been denied, and then how many emergency changes. We can usually 99.9% of the time correlate the amount of emergency changes to the amount of pending jobs. Because if I'm requesting jobs over and over again and Rick's not approving them, I'm going to open up an emergency change and knock it out there anyway. And then 9 times out of 10, the emergency change is going to break the environment because we're not aware of what the impact of that's going to be. The other piece is how many out-of-band and in-band changes do I have compared back to service desk? Okay, so this is going to show me a report that says this is the amount of changes that we found that didn't match up to any RFCs sitting within service desk. So let's go back to our other product. And I'm going to have to re-log in here. And yesterday, this is exactly where this blew up, and it's not going to happen today. The demo gods will be with me. All right. Bring this guy down. BR. Now, when I log into this guy, what I'm going to see is I'm going to see that reboot request sitting right across the top. Let's hope. Oh, actually, that was a better one. All right. So those are my ITIL change requests right there, forwarded internally. So this is showing me changes coming from VCM. But what I want to do is get to a point where I can come in and approve that. So I'm going to go right to VCM changes right here. And here's where it brings up that ticket. So then now it comes back and it starts going through the process itself. Now I'm doing this manually, but for certain changes, I can go through and have the whole thing actually built out directly from here. And I can also start doing CI population. So whenever I have a change come through from VCM, it's automatically going to take those assets and populate the CIs associated, software running on top of those systems, any associated CIs with that piece back in here. Okay, so then now let me go back to VCM. And then here's where it's giving me that report. In VSM, we found all these other changes that went through the process, and here's where we found that one change that we listed before that was outside of the process. So it's a change reconciliation window that shows me the health of what's going on in my environment with in-band change and out-of-band change. Again, this is when I'm moving to a virtualized or cloud environment where I want to start combining different tool sets and automating the process. As a change management person, I just care about the high-level reports and the auditing of what's taking place, but the process underneath should run on its own.
So it looks to me like you actually get to validate that people are following your processes.
Well, that's really it, right? And the processes are actually doing something out there for me. And so here, let's go to my request outstanding. And here we go. So what do we want to do with this change? Yesterday, we had the crowd denied the change. So I say that today we override and we approve the change. So
what do you guys think? Who wants to reboot George's box?
You're putting me on a spot if you want me to reboot it, because yesterday it didn't work. Okay, so let's go for it. I like the mentality. All right, let's see the challenge here. All right, so I'm going to roll into this guy. I'm going to come back into VCM. And again, I want to show you guys how there's still no ticket associated with it. Okay, well, so now I did. So now it's got the request. So it opened up the ticket, 677. And we should see it match up on the other side with 677. But notice in the second column, and I'm going to read this out for those of you back there, what does it say as a status next to it? Pending. Right, so it's still going through the process. Okay? And let's go back to my interface over here. Okay, so it's pending out here, 677, VCM change, showing me dependencies of that change, and let's go ahead and take action against the guy. Oh, actually, you know what? We could have done it through the workflow, too.
Yeah, let's go look at the workflow, George.
Let's go look at the workflow. I completely agree.
Well, you can click the button right there on the top.
Okay, so I'm going to click no. So here's the great thing about VSM as well, too, that makes it different than other service desks. I actually have workflow that I can look off of and take action. So this one's very simple, right? It's not a complicated change. But if I had to go to different steps on the cab or different levels of elevation, it would actually show me that. So right now I'm just at the process where I need to either approve it or deny it. So I can actually click into the workflow, and it'll take me down one of those tracks, and I can come up and click Take Action.
We used to have a much more complex workflow, but George would get lost every time.
That is so true. Yeah, I'm from Panama, man. I still get lost. I can barely speak English. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put right here, and we all said we would approve it, right?
Do it.
You guys want to see this fail. They're already yelling out, do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh our workflow.
So you'll notice the approval box went green, and the approve change step became active. So right now it's talking and passing that instruction back to VCM, Configuration Manager, to go ahead and submit that job to reboot George's box.
Right, so now what happens is there's a heartbeat that's taken place. So it's not instant, but there's a heartbeat that's taken place that's going out there and continually looking to see what is the other side saying or doing that's going to cause my action. So if the demo gods are with me today, what we should see is Steve, CMDB still alive, popping up on this window here in a little bit, and then the reboot going ahead and transforming on this box. If we would have denied it, it would have immediately come back in with a denied status.
So how many of you right now have an RFC process? Right? So what happens? Your operations guys go in and into remedy or whatever it happens to be and enter a request for change, right? That goes through the process, gets approved, one hopes, and then what do they have to do? Take the information from that system and go manually do something somewhere, and you hope that they're not that human and that the errors don't get the better of them.
Right, and so now we switch to scheduled approved, right? So it's updating the system, but his point is exactly what's true. I have to go to multiple interfaces and take multiple actions with a lot of manual intervention just to get to this point, right? I'm showing you both interfaces, but look what happened. All this is automated under the covers. I just went back in to show you both interfaces and show you what happens. I can tell you as a former IT guy, I never wanted to go in and open up tickets. And that was one of the big reasons. And I always populated those tickets not in a good way. As an approver of those tickets later on, I got mad at people for doing the same thing. You're giving me garbage as to what this is going to impact or what that change really is. Now this really starts solving that problem and automating change. And then accounting for out-of-band change as well. And there we go. So now it came back and now it's rebooting this VM. So all of my applications down, gone, done. All in an automated fashion. And yes, it worked. Come on. Woo! Yay! Give it up for a Panamanian, man. You don't understand. Yesterday I was up here struggling.
And the best thing is George didn't have to type one thing. So, let's step through the rest of that process then. We're pretty much, at this point, quickly resolved our problem by using that change tracking that we saw George show us, and then the ability to right-click and roll that back to undo it. The trouble is, as we pointed out, that's how you reboot 400 servers in the middle of the day. So really what we want to do is when we get to this issue identified part and we start to make that fix, we want it to automatically raise that RFC for us. Populate it with the linked CIs, put the explanation in there so that we don't have to manually do that. The next thing that happens, we hope, is that somebody follows a workflow and it goes around doing its round of approvals. We may actually want to do impact analysis and see which systems are going to be able to be affected by this, and we can do that automatically as well. Then we approve the change. We want that service back up. And automatically, those changes then get submitted to the machines that we need to make changes on. So we've removed all that double keying so that we're not having to do these things twice. The next thing that happens is something that we're not very good at. IT, who knows what the Deming diagram is? This is an ITIL session.
The Deming wheel?
Yeah, so the first two, we're actually pretty good at these days. The plan, you all said you have cabs and we get together and we discuss these changes before we implement them. And then IT is pretty good at the do. Most of the time, people do just what they're meant to do, where they're meant to do it. What we're not very good at is the verify. We don't go back and make sure that the changes that were meant to happen happened everywhere that they were meant to happen, and that nothing else changed at the same time. And if we don't do the verify, how do we do the act? How do we use that feedback to better do the change next time? We can't. So we automatically submit the job, the service comes back up. The next thing we do is validate and verify those changes. And then update the CMDB to make sure that it reflects the current state of the world.
Are you getting to Steve's argument here shortly?
Yeah.
Let's see it.
So Steve should come up and talk to this one. What do? We want to avoid that outage from happening in the first place. So using that performance tools that learn our normal behavior helps us do that. So we have a change occur, we start to see anomalies happening in our environment. Because we know that doesn't normally happen in our environment, we can very quickly get a smart alert that says, hold on, things don't look right anymore. And then because we know where they don't look right, very quickly get to the root cause of the problem that's pending, use that to help us identify the issue, point us in the right place to look for the changes that occurred, follow the rest of the process as we just described it, verify that the change occurred, close or update the RFC.
This eliminates the RTM end user, real-time monitoring by the end user. Now you're actually letting the end user know you may possibly see a problem here earlier, or we're taking out a change window because we've determined that there's going to be an issue, and we're automating the fixing of that change in the background. And at the end of the day, that's all you really want, right? You want to understand that we're out there on top of things before you are.
To take it one step further, once we know that there's changes that causes issues in our environment, what we really want to do is create desired state rules that describe that change as being bad, so that the next time it occurs, we don't have to wait for the performance anomalies to start. We can flag that change as bad and undo it, so that we never get to that point where we have to rely on the alerting system. So the next time it looks like this. Change occurs, compliance catches it and says, hold on, your systems are no longer configured the way you've said they should be. We can repair that. That looks a lot simpler to me. We're going to step through these real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, we have like 5 to 10 minutes left. So if you guys want to start hitting us with questions, feel free to start stepping up to the mic right now and hitting us up.
So this was a quick example of building trusted machines for your cloud environment. And you really want to start with machines that are configured correctly, patched appropriately, and have the software configured in the right state. You want to do that before you put them into the catalog. So we want to be able to check them for vendor best practices, for regulatory compliance mandates, for our own internal compliance mandates, our standards.
Right.
We want... Sorry, go.
No, I was going to say, I mean, the idea is to go ahead and build a machine right the first time, harden it, and then templatize it for delivery moving forward in the future. Yes, sir.
Good morning. The changes that you made when you were doing the demo, are all those tracked by user ID as well in logs? Or?
Yes, so they are. So now I know exactly what end user is making those changes now that are opening up those tickets within Service Desk. Yes, sir.
Good morning. How does ADM fit in this picture?
ADM?
Yes.
ADM was that impact analysis in that bubble when we followed the process so that you can understand how this change relates to the rest of the environment.
Right, and there's a new component, by the way, VIN, Virtual Infrastructure Navigator, with ADM. You guys ought to take a look at that, especially in the PCI type example with Entrusted Cloud. So hit us up on that too.
Are there any key dependencies or additional features you get by going to vSphere 5?
Yes, I think so, because, I mean, vSphere 5 is going to bring a lot of new platforms to the table. It's going to have a lot more integration with some of the other products. So what you're going to see now is VMware's turning it into more of a suite. If you notice now with vSphere being put out with 5, now a new release of VCD, new release of vShield, those are all transforming more and more into single platform type views as a suite. So now the whole suite is going to start tying into processes and tying back into VSM like this does. So now with vSphere 5 and VCD, I can actually use VSM as a front-end portal for VCD. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Yes. Could you talk quickly about how hybrid cloud is impacted in this context? For example, if you want to apply these tools and rules to the public cloud, and how the API infrastructure allows for you to get that data and be able to manage and monitor it.
Right. So for a hybrid cloud, now we're starting to get closer to the public cloud. Right. So private cloud, all this works great, works out of the box. A little bit of an interview process. When we start moving more into hybrid clouds, it's going to take a little bit more work to gather that data, right, and to build out certain zones and have that communication piece, and also to get the provider to really buy into giving you some sort of control within that environment. Public cloud, they have total control right now. So what we're doing is working on solutions to give you visibility. Does anybody want anything more than visibility in a public cloud right now? Probably not. So we're working heavily on giving you visibility to actually what's taking place, because you want to be able to audit what they're doing in the background. And that's, you're not in your head, and that's exactly where we're headed, because right now, and I do this in the next presentation, which is Trusted Cloud, 70% of all cloud providers that we've talked to absolve themselves from security. So absolve themselves from process, compliance, to exposing that back to the consumer. We're turning around and saying, we're going to give you the tools and work with the cloud providers to make sure that you have visibility into what's taking place. So then that way, you know when they're making changes that bring down your business services. Yes, sir.
You referred to third-generation tools that are capable of baselining what normal behavior looks like under different circumstances and then proactively notifying or taking action when things aren't normal. Can you detail that? What specifically are you referring to there?
Steve, do you want to answer that? Step up to a mic.
Yeah, so we're actually talking about vCenter operations. Have you taken a look at that product at all? Yeah, so what the product's capable of doing is pulling in all the metric data that's available from the different monitoring systems in your environment. And then we apply a set of analytics to understand the behavior of them. We've actually got 13 patented algorithms that we use to be able to do that understanding of behavior. And then what we do is we're actually in real time able to correlate abnormalities, to see patterns of abnormalities and amounts of abnormal behavior that indicate a building problem. So what we're able to do is to alert you kind of at the knee of the curve of this explosion of abnormalities that lead to performance problems. And so that's how the alerting works. The alerting also uses correlation techniques to be able to understand exactly what are the abnormal behaviors that are most highly correlated to the problem and what silo of technology that problem began in. So that's kind of what it does. And it also abstracts metric behaviors to higher level measures of performance. So you can actually look at health, workload, capacity risk, basically abstracting the performance of thousands of metrics up to these higher level measures that you can view in these hierarchical dashboards that can show you all the way from your virtual data centers down to individual virtual machines exactly where you're experiencing performance problems in terms of those three areas that I talked about. And then you can drill down immediately from there to get the root cause analysis. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Thanks. A key point, though, go ahead and get to the mic, but a key point is physical as well. So VCOps, enterprise standalone, VCM, and VSM cover physical as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and multiple sources of data besides just virtual center data. And besides, so even if you're monitoring information from within the VM using another tool, we can actually incorporate that into the analysis as well.
So just a quick follow-up question. Is any of that information exposed or available to third-party applications via API or some other mechanism?
So we have a complete outbound API and also an inbound API. So you can actually send events that we can then correlate, like change events and things like that. We can correlate those against the performance changes. We also have an outbound API that allows us to send the results of the analytics, like the alerting and things like that, to other dashboards as well, and we do that quite often.
So there's a VCOps and vCenter Configuration Manager session this afternoon at 3:30. So if you want to get more information on that, drop by that one.
And a Trusted Cloud Preso at 1 that's going to be rocking. there's no more questions, guys. Thank you so much for your time today. So glad you guys picked that reboot and that it worked.
Have a thank you.